Act 3 of Extra Time. Real Salt Lake is ready to make their debut in 2009 after having a bye in Week 1. They have to travel to Seattle where the Sounders have all that noise, all that crowd, and they got that 3-0 win against New York. How does this one play out?
Greg, this should be a great game because looking forward to this season, and most people pick Real Salt Lake as one of the contenders in the Western Conference. Yeah. Seattle, I've been touting them all along. A spectacular opening.
Wait a second. Touting them all along. You had New York beating them last week.
I was out of my mind for a moment. But I've always said Seattle was going to be good because I believe that Casey Keller keeps them in every game. Yeah. And I think Montero, he's the real deal. He showed it against New York. Hurtado and Tyrone Marshall did a great job in the central part of the midfield. I think they're going to be very tough, Seattle, to beat in their place.
Do you think that they have enough, though, to stop what Real Salt Lake brings? I mean, you've got Javier Morales, arguably one of the best setup men in the league. You have Kyle Beckerman, a hard guy in the midfield. You also have Yura Movsisyan up top, who was showing at the end of the year he can really score goals.
I still think Seattle can stop that. My thoughts, Alonso and Brad Evans did a great job deep in the midfield. Sure. Movsisyan really came on, was spectacular, but who's going to add to the scoring for Real Salt Lake?
Could be Robbie Finley, could be Clinton Mathis even. We're really not sure who's going to be playing alongside, but it should be a good game nonetheless, and I'm actually going to pick Real Salt Lake on this one. 3 big, possibly season-defining matchups in the Eastern Conference this week in MLS, and it starts with Toronto at Columbus on Saturday afternoon. Shep, what's going to determine the outcome of this game?
Well, I love your energy.
Yeah, it's big game.
Columbus is going to have that energy, that first game back at home after winning the Cup. Mm-hmm. So for Toronto, they're going to need to find a way to shut down Schelotto. And without Cole Robinson, maybe it's Sam Cronin that has to slide over to do that. They need to try and stop that attack orchestrated by Schelotto.
Well, Columbus will also be without Alejandro Moreno, who's off with Venezuela for international duty, so maybe the youngster Steven Leonard gets in there. He had some goals last year. Another big game in the East, Chicago at DC on Saturday night. What does DC need to do to get 3 points? They blew it sort of at the end against Los Angeles, but they're facing a weakened Chicago Fire defense.
Yeah, Greg, they are. And for Christian Gomez, this will be his first game since coming back at home. I think the crowd will go wild. I think they have to keep up the pace, DC United, the rhythm of the game, get into the attacking third and put the pressure on. I'm not thrilled with DC United on the defensive side of the ball, so they need to continue to attack.
Well, Chicago obviously has a terrific attack. We'll see if maybe Jaime Moreno gets back in for DC United as well. That would change some things, I think, for United's attack. New England at New York, also on Saturday night. This is the kind of, it's like you against me. You're a New Yorker. I'm with New England sometimes. It's an I-95 battle royale at Giant Stadium. Will this wake up New York a little bit after their debacle out in Seattle?
Well, that was, Greg, for New York, horrific against Seattle. Nobody showed up. They need Angel to step up, and they're going to be missing Boyens, New York. They're going to on international duty with New Zealand. They'll be missing Rojas. And New England Revolution, as you know, they've been for New York their nemesis. They just seem like they can never get over that hurdle.
Well, questions whether still Taylor Twellman will be back or Steve Ralston. Who steps in for Rojas, do you think, in the midfield for New York?
Yeah, I really have no idea because they have a lot of speed that they have not used yet. So Oduro, I think, will maybe get a start. Kanji played out wide on the left side of the midfield. Maybe he comes centrally tucked in behind Juan Pablo Angel. Luke Sassano, Ubi Parapovic. They have options. It's going to be a big game for both teams.
Well, they need to get on track. That game actually is on Saturday night at 7:30 on Fox Soccer Channel, so be sure to check it out. We have a quick email question before we go. Kent in Kearney, Missouri asks, what impact will scaling back the roster size and losing the reserve league have in the short term and the long term? And what message does it send to developing players, investors, fans, etc.?
Well, Kent, I understand the question, and it's a good question, but you have to keep it in the context of these terrible economic times. So if you have to lose something, I think that was the prudent thing to do. Is it a great thing? No, it's not. But in terms of the business for the league, you have to watch your cost. And I think, if anything, teams will have to increase their ability to scout outside because they're not developing from within.
Yeah, and maybe this is a moment when the teams can develop some better relationships with the USL to work on those guys as developing younger players as they come up. So, the youth system's also coming up through the academies. Most of the teams now have under 16, under 18 teams, and that's also, I think, a very good sign for the future. You can email us any questions or comments, suggestions, whatever, at extratime@mlsnet.com. And that's all the time we have this week on Extra Time, but join us next week and we'll kick it around.